So what actually happened was the college approached me about doing a talk at the Convocation. So I thought, of course, and I had it in mind a speech I'd given to our daughter's middle school graduation at Manly's Pebble Hill here in Syracuse, and pretty good speech. It was kind of funny, and so I thought I'll just use that. So about 3 days before, I couldn't find it. I looked everywhere. I couldn't find a speech. So I remembered the gist of it, which was about kindness and this girl that I knew when I was a kid. So I just rewrote it basically from scratch. And my intention at the time was sort of like, I'm a Buddhist practitioner, and so in that tradition, there's a lot of talk about compassion and empathy and kindness, and also in a very intellectual way. There are tens of thousands of volumes on this topic. So I just thought it would be kind of fun, maybe, and helpful to introduce that topic in a more academic setting. So I thought I'd just do a quick sort of endorsement of kindness to say, I'm an academic, I'm an intellectual, I hope. For me, this is really important. And so in a sense, I thought maybe to sort of, as the students were leaving SU, to kind of say, no, this is actually something you can take seriously. In fact, you have to take it seriously. When you're giving a speech like that, the first thing in your mind is, well, not to put anybody to sleep or drive them toward the exit, So I remember sitting in my little writing shed going, okay, wait a minute, this is it's not an essay. It's not going in the New Yorker. It's going to be in the Dome. It'll probably be either hot or cold. People will have come there to see their child or grandchild graduate, and they didn't really sign up to hear from me. So in that kind of situation, I think you want to be as specific as possible. Say a couple things that make them go, oh yeah, he's actually talking about my life. If you can be funny, that always helps a little bit. So yeah, so I think that was, and I also remember thinking that the prose style should be a little bit less maybe complex than I might normally use. It's a deep topic, but I thought I'm just going to kind of hit the first 4 inches of it and try to speak in fairly short sentences. And again, it's just sort of audience awareness, which is one of the things I talk about with my students is when you're a writer, your goal is to make a kind of frank, friendly, intimate communication with the reader. So that means, you're always thinking about who she is and where she might be at that point in the story. So I definitely had in mind a bunch of people who, as I have been at graduations, are kind of anxious to get to the party. The thing that made me interested in writing about that was it was a sin of omission, really. I knew her, I saw that she was struggling, we all saw it. And I think I probably made a couple of overtures, but she was very anxious and very nervous. And so I got that kind of feeling that you sometimes get, which is I didn't want to go down with the ship. I didn't want to be seen as her advocate and have it cost me, basically. So there was nothing that I did that was aggressive or wrong or hurtful. I was very, kind of nice to her personally. But in retrospect, I think, wouldn't it have been lovely, if I'd have been self-possessed enough and, to be heroic enough to actually sort of, advocate for her or intercede. But so that was interesting to me, that it wasn't like an overt unkindness, but it was just a failure of kindness to fully assert itself. Yeah, I'm not really sure because, it's funny, when I gave the talk, I was kind of proud of it. By the time I polished it up, I always feel that way when I finish something, oh, that's kind of good. And I was looking forward to giving it, a little nervous, of course, gave it, and then you kind of like, you think, well, I wonder how I did. And so there was a big reception out on the quad, and I kind of just innocently wandered around waiting for some praise, and none was forthcoming. There was one guy who said, are you the guy who gave that speech? And I said, yeah. He goes, oh. So it wasn't a huge success, but it wasn't until later when a friend of mine at the New York Times posted it, then it went viral. But I think the simplicity is maybe the thing, because I wasn't trying to be academic. I wasn't trying to be intellectually persuasive, really. I just was speaking from the heart in the simplest way I could about this thing that certainly has mattered to me over the years. So I think if I had been a little more anxious to prove it, it might not have been as convincing. But in that setting where I think I was shooting for 8 minutes or something, or 10, it was kind of a blurt of truthfulness. And I think, most people who get to a certain point in this life, they've had that insight that everything else goes away. Your accomplishments, whether you live your dream or not, all that stuff, it all goes away. And by a certain point in life, you can no longer entertain the fantasy that you're perfect, or that your power will always prevail. I mean, we know better. So then, in that moment, I think we all have experienced kindness or have given it. And in a certain way, it does last. Actually, if you are kind to somebody, they take that kindness into their body, into their whole being, and then they go forth in a better state. So it really does perpetuate, literally. And I mean, not in any kind of New Age way, but literally. So I think people responded to that, really. What happened afterwards is, okay, so it went viral. It became a book. And then I got a chance to kind of tour a little bit and talk and interview about it. And one of the things that is interesting is that, kindness is a pretty simple concept. And I would say in 99% of our interactions, that's a great goal. Just be kind, Even if you do what we often do, which is mistake or conflate kindness with niceness. 99% of the time, just be nice. That's, But the book was and the speech was a chance to kind of go a little deeper in my own mind. So, if you wake up in the morning with the resolve, just be kind. Okay, that's good. And as I say, in most cases, you'll have a better day. But I thought of an example, like let's say you hop up in the morning, you're going to be kind. You go to the coffee shop and you see that the barista's been crying. All right, now you're going to be kind. What is that exactly? Well, it may be kind just to shut up. Leave the person alone. But on the other hand, maybe if you said just the right thing, it might be helpful. So then you see that kindness is kind of a gateway virtue. Like you aspire to kindness. In that situation, suddenly what you need to bring to bear is self-awareness. So you have to say to yourself, why am I feeling like I should intercede on this person's behalf? Is there any impure motion, impure motivation? Do I have a little savior complex here? Do I think I know more than I know? On the other hand, am I being too timid? So kindness then morphs to self-awareness or alertness. That's a whole other topic. How do we foster self-awareness and alertness? And this is where the Eastern tradition has volumes to say about that, about techniques and practices that actually will show you your own mind, show you how the state of your mind impacts your ability to be kind in a given situation. So that would be an interesting thing to write, but I'm not qualified. I think social media has had a big effect on the way that we imagine other people. So if I'm sitting here with you, there you are, and we have eye contact, we have body language, and a basic set of manners kicks in, So if for example, if I do an event somewhere and I say something that offends somebody, which I hope I don't, but if I do, if I run into that person on the sidewalk, the first thing they're going to do is say, "Hi, Mr. Saunders, I just saw your speech." We're going to shake hands. However, there's something in that, and that person is, unless he's really a psycho, is going to be really, he's going to be enacting a set of manners that we all know. And in turn, so am I. If he says, the last half of your speech was a total disaster, I say, "Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. Why do you think so?" So, and that's because we're accountable to each other by being in our physical proximity. Social media, especially if you're behind an anonymous facade, or even if you're not these days, that whole convention drops away. So, and we're spending a great deal of time on social media, and the goals are to agitate, to get attention, to provoke. Even if you're doing that in a nice way, you're saying, "Look at me, look at me." So if you take that mindset, the mindset that you feel when you come out of social media, and you multiply that by the millions of interactions a day, it would be really surprising if the culture hadn't shifted a little bit to brittleness and surface argument and disrespect. And it's harder in that environment to be kind, I think. Even if you're being kind on social media, I would argue you're being sort of facile kind because you don't really know who you're being kind to. It's a performative kind of thing. So for me, as a writer and a teacher of literature is kind of the the, the inverse of that. In literature, I take a project over here, I work on it for 3 or 4 years. I'm imagining a very smart reader that I respect very much and who I want to impress, but I won't impress at the deepest level. Every change I make in the document is to that end. So when you're finished with that, you've basically made a document that is a document of respect. And if it's good, the reader basically rises to meet you. You have risen as a writer. You've found sort of your best self through revision. The reader likewise, and you have a very high level communion with the person. So that's my preference anyway, you know, and I'm not on social media. Well, it's hard to believe that 10 years have passed. And as I was coming over here, I thought, I wonder if I've gotten kinder in those 10 years. I think it's been up or down, you know, up and down. But yeah, I think I actually, you know, I went back and read it, and I agree with it. You know, there's nothing that we leave behind that's more powerful than a legacy of kindnesses. And it, for me, it kind of lights life up. If you say even the smallest thing, the smallest act of kindness is immensely powerful. You actually don't know what that might do for somebody.